Thank you, Katrina. Is it pretty cool in here? Comfortable? Yeah, all right. This week we're talking about the concept that sticks and stones can break my bones. You heard that as a child, right? Or maybe as an adult, I don't know. But guns will kill you. Probably didn't hear that much. But the idea that sticks and stones will break my bones, but guns will kill you, is kind of the theme today, as we have, I hope, would be a robust discussion, as we did in the first session, about the ideas of guns, and not so much guns, but the idea of violence itself. I want to kind of start with the story of creation as we think about this topic. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and God said, "It is good." Can you say that? It is good. And then God created, I think what came next, were the waters and the land. And God said, "It is good." And then God created the vegetation and the animals. And God said, "It is good." And then God created humans. Jumped on me. Anyway, no. God created man and woman, and He said it? No, He said it's very good. Okay? And so the reason I start off with that concept is because when we talk about violence, and that's what we're really talking about today, the carrying out of violence in a certain way, really in that scenario, there's no place for violence. There's place for love. There's place for an understanding. There's place for dialogue. There's place for people to grow and understand each other and care about each other. There's this room for being unified in thought and in mind, because we understand that we are the product of a creativity that is a product of energy in most cases, as far as I'm concerned, that is good, and that we all are created by this force. And so we have that in common. We are one. And yet we forget sometimes, especially when we think people shouldn't or should be doing something, should be acting a certain way, should be treating me a certain way. We get confused, and therefore we become somewhat anxious, and then over time, if it happens enough, we can become violent. And that's what gun control, that's what the idea of guns is all about, is they are used to carry out violence and violent acts. In most cases, not all. Now, I don't have a problem with a gun. I've never met a gun that wants to hurt me. But I have met people with guns who might want to hurt me. When I was a child, one of them threatened my mother. Didn't hurt her, thank God, but took a gun and took her purse. It took her a while to get over that. I still remember that as a child. So it's not the gun, it's the person who's using the gun who has convinced themselves, I guess, that they have a right to do that. Now, in Isaiah, and in Micah too, it's in two different parts of the Bible, it says, "Come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us His ways, so that we may walk in His paths. He will judge between the nations, and will settle disputes for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. Come, descendants of Jacob, let us walk in the light of the Lord." That was 2,600 years ago, approximately, that was written and said. What do you think? Is it working? Pardon? Yeah, we don't know, do we? We can look at the news and we'd say, no, it's not working. If we looked at the other 90% of people in the world, we might say, yeah, it's working in many ways, in many places. But that doesn't mean that the 10% that are in turmoil that we shouldn't pay attention to and try to support one another and support certain ideas. So in the idea of guns, there are 2 or 3 or 4 things that kind of come to my mind, then we'll just talk. One is that I'll explain this in a minute, but is that we have a right to bear arms. That is our Constitution. That is a right in America. It's not a right in all countries, by the way, but it is a right in America. So one says we have a right to bear arms. The second piece of it says that most people use those guns to either kill, most people who use the guns in violence use them to kill themselves. That's 67% of all the people who use guns do it to kill themselves. Suicide is the number one reason. And what sociologists say, and what people who have studied say, is that people who try to kill themselves with a gun and don't make it probably don't try again. It's not a repeat thing. It's a kind of interesting phenomenon. It's kind of like in the moment they decided to do this. They were insane in the moment and tried to take their life. But if it didn't work, they can sometimes give up on it. Not always, but sometimes give up on it, especially with guns. So the thought is if they didn't have guns, that most of them still be alive. No way to prove that, but that's what people think. So we have guns that kill people from the standpoint of suicide, and then we have a few percentage of people who get hurt accidentally by guns, and then the balance of it is people who shoot other people in violence. And the interesting thing is the highest percentage of those are families who know each other. It's not a bunch of criminals running down the street shooting people. When we hear even of the mass murders that take place, the nightclub in New Orleans or different types of things that happen throughout the world, like in Paris, what we know is that is a small percentage of the people who are shot by guns in a year's time. And yet we put a lot of emphasis on that event because it's big. But the other 200 people who get shot the rest of the month, not much attention is paid to at all. So we kind of have it out of whack, I think, sometimes. And sometimes I think it's just because we've accepted it as a way of life. It just is. And so I looked at this subject and read about this subject, and I had more questions than I had anything else. One of the questions I asked myself was, are we still living in a world where the Second Amendment makes sense? Now, I can get you going on that, can't I, some of you? Yeah, I'm sure, okay? But I asked myself that question. And then the second thing that I looked at was, if we did away with, if we had better laws, let me put it that way, on the restriction of guns. You know, you have to take a driver's test to drive a car. You do not have to take a test to buy a gun. And they're easily accessible to just about anybody today because there are so many loopholes in the laws. And so if people could not have guns easily and there was more restriction on those who had them, how would they handle them? Would it be any better? Would it be a reason to say, yes, the Second Amendment is in good standing and should stay that way? I don't believe. I have two guns at home. I have a .38, which I took from my father. It's the truth, okay? And not being mean, but what happened was my dad he was a Marine, and he didn't love guns, but he always had a gun in the house. And he was about 80 years old. He was still driving. And he also had a permit to carry a gun, concealed weapon, when that became law. And so he comes to a family party, and somebody says, you know, I don't think you ought to be having guns. He goes, it's no problem whatsoever. And he goes to the car. He says, I'll show you because I keep it unloaded. He put the gun into the ground, and bang, and it went off. There was a bullet in it. I went over and said, Dad, I'd really like to take that gun from you. Are you going to give me a hard time? And he said, no, I need to give it up. It scared him, obviously. So I still have that pistol. I don't have it loaded. I don't even know if I'd have the capability to use it. Even if somebody were attacking me, I'm not sure I would. If somebody were attacking Vicky, I may. But I'm not even sure that I have the capability to use it. My dad said I didn't. He said, you shouldn't carry a gun because you won't use it. You'll think before you'll shoot. And you can't do that. And so, therefore, I have a principle not to be much in favor of guns. But I do own two. Family guns. So as I look at the subject, I get confused too as to what's my right and should I exercise that right and how do I live within that right in a peaceful manner. Also, what good is it to me? They're taking up space in my closet. That's what they do. That's about the only thing they do, and maybe bring back some memories. So I look at guns and I say, okay, number one, it's not the gun, it's violence. Number two, if we had an inability for people to get guns who are ill, we know there would be probably a 50% drop in the suicide rate. And that would be significant, by the way. And that most guns are used to hurt people that you love, supposedly. And so what is the good for them? Do I need them really to protect myself? And most people who own guns today, the polls have shown, believe that they need them to protect themselves. And maybe they do, I don't know. According to where you live, I guess, in some ways, as to have that feeling or whether it's the truth. So we look at this whole thing of guns, and I say to you and ask you, do you think, and what do you think about guns, and do you even think guns should be allowed? Do you think that guns are an important part of your ability to protect yourself? And no, there are no wrong answers in here, by the way. We don't have to agree. I think we just need to dialogue on this idea. And not what does God say about guns, what do you say about guns? And how do you deal with them? So I have Ellie raising her hand. Yes, Ellie? 1 second, Ellie. Got to have a mic.
You got to have the mic. This is my function now, my exercise
Thank you, honey.
for today.
I was actually asked to speak because I'm one of the few conservatives. But anyway, I would say there's no kids in here. It's similar to the subject of prostitution. As long as there's a need, it's going to happen. And just like it took me many years to appreciate the military and understand that need, I would say that if people felt safe in their home, they wouldn't have a gun. And secondly, my neighbor was robbed in the middle of the day with an alarm system and everything. So, by someone she didn't even know. So, as long as there's a need to protect yourself in this world, there are going to be people that have them. I personally don't want one, and I don't have one. Mm-hmm. But as long as there's a need, they'll exist.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So there's this perceived need by a lot of people to have one. And that's what the polls show. Those who own them, that's what they say. They're protecting themselves. Jackie?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I think it's okay to own a gun for protection, but I don't understand why anyone could want or why we would have assault rifles. I don't think anyone should have that.
Okay. Mark?
There's no cause for assault rifles.
Right. Thank you. Go ahead, Mark.
The right to bear arms is an inalienable human right. You're a human. You have the right to self-defense. You have the right to defend others and your freedom. No other human has the moral authority to disarm you unless you give them cause, such as committing a crime or being dangerously insane. Guns are tools. Their use is determined by the owner. You can use them for good or evil. The CDC, the Disease Research Group, put out a report a few years ago that showed that their low estimate of reported defensive gun use was 108,000 times per year. So there is a need. Mm-hmm. As to the types of weapons, if you want to go by constitutional protections, bringing up rifles and such, the Second Amendment has been ruled that you have the right to all arms suitable for a militia in common lawful use. That is any semi-automatic weapon. The purpose constitutionally was for the citizenry to be able, as a last resort, to defend their freedom and themselves against any foreign or domestic enemy, and that includes criminals. So that's my feeling.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm going to try and draw together a couple of things from what you said, an experience I had yesterday where I was 2 seconds from turning around to my neighbor, yelling his name and saying, "Frank, come on out here and show these folks your gun." Because what happened to me was totally inappropriate, and it was an example of the reasons people feel a need for guns, or what they profess as their need, is disintegration of our social system. Our culture has vicious little pockets everywhere. And what you said is the right to defend yourself. The point I think we need to look at is that we transfer our feelings of insecurity into this item, into this gun, and let it do the work that in the Bible we should be doing for ourselves. We should be girding ourselves, not with this automatic weapon with no thought at all, you can kill as many people as you want, but the internal self-protection, the internal sense of self, and building rather than using this like children do when they go into schools. They're not coming in as a warrior. They have been bullied to the point where they react, but no one is interceded during the bullying to teach them how to defend themselves without that weapon until they reach a crisis point. Rather, teach them, I stand up, I fight back, and when I turn and ask for assistance, people acknowledge me and they help protect me. And I think that's what's wrong with our culture, is we've made this leap that it's very easy to just react without thought and kill people. And as far as law enforcement's concerned, they want stronger controls because they're the ones most at risk. And I see no reason why I should renew my driver's license every 5 years, but my license for a gun is like that. Yes, ma'am.
It's okay, let's wait a second, Ellen. Let every
But I
person
should be
speak, please.
tested. Every 2 years, take me to the range
Right.
and make me show you that I know how to use this item safely.
I agree with that. But my husband is a veteran, and closer. My husband is a veteran, and we both own firearms. We both have concealed carry permits. And in this climate, things are different than they were maybe 2 years ago, and people are more violent. And we have them as a source of protection. And for me, I feel a lot better knowing that as a black person walking around where there's so many people that have hatred for black people and people of color, and that I could be attacked at any given moment, and I need to be prepared. And the absolute last thing you want to do is to use a weapon. That's the last thing you want to do, because it would be horrible. And the repercussions are something that you have to live with for the rest of your life. But if you commit to getting the testing and going through the courses and having a concealed carry permit, then you know the risks. And so that you have to live with that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say, I understand the problem. We live in a society that, we train since we're a leader to, go to war and defend our country. So arms are going to be there in our society. I think you have to trust in the universe and have God in your heart, and you're not going to need any arm because you just need to trust in God. That's all.
Okay. Thank you.
One of the things that I do is I happen to work in organ transplant, and I see donor cases every single day for homicide, for suicide. A large majority, like you were saying, were individuals who had tried suicide before and who did kill themselves by gun, but there are multiple other methods that people have used to kill themselves. And when you have that deep a depression, it doesn't matter what tool they're going to use. If they are that sick at heart, they're going to find a way to kill themselves, whether it's with a gun, hanging themselves, carbon monoxide, whatever. It's like a malignant thing in them, and they're going to succeed. So it's not just the availability or ability to get a gun that allows them to do that. The second thing is we have not trained our children, and it needs to start young in kindergarten, preschool, all the way through on how to work through differences without resorting to violence. So if you start children very young, hey, I don't like that, I want that toy, and they have a fight, and then you teach them, how do you get along? How do you work together? And they start carrying that all the way through, and you do that in every classroom, in every elementary school, you're going to decrease the number of bullies, because it's going to get caught out, and they're going to be on the other end of it at some point. You're going to reduce the amount of perhaps violence in the home. So it needs to start at a ground level point where you start somewhere and just start working towards that goal by teaching children to start getting together, getting along, working issues out, and then that carries home where they take it home to their parents, and then their parents start learning it from their children. The other part is Mark and I may have different views on guns. We own guns. He owns guns. He's the expert. I'm not. But I have actually shot 22 pistol, 22 rifle, 38 special, 357. I've shot a variety of guns. It's not as big a thing for me. If you are in a neighborhood where you need protection, get one, follow the rules, get the training. One of the biggest areas I have concerns with is people who have guns and have small children in their house, and they do not take basic precautions to keep those guns away from their 2, 3, 4-year-old, because when you're that young and you see TV, 10-year-olds, one of the things we did with her, all the way down, is we've taught her gun safety, very, very strict gun safety. She will not go to a house where there's guns and we don't know what's going on with them. So that's the other part, is as a parent, you have to be responsible for where your child goes, find out if they're not safe, don't let your child do it. But I just want to bring that up. We just have to start small and work up.
Thank you. Back in the back.
Caitlin brought that up to me but didn't want to say anything. She said that if you have children, teach them the rules of safety. As a small child, it's stop, don't touch, leave the area, find an adult. We don't know what other people have in their houses. We don't know what their kids do. So from 3 years old, I taught her that. When she was 9 and had a BB gun at a friend's house, she taught them, who were older, how to be safe around when they were shooting cans in the front yard. So if you have children, even if you don't have guns, go find out the Eddie Eagle safety rules, which I just said, and then the 4 rules of handling guns. If you do not break any of those 4 rules, you have to break 2 of them to accidentally harm someone. As you said for your father, he did not treat all guns as if they were loaded. He assumed it was unloaded. Never do that.
Right.
I don't care if I've unloaded it in front of her,
Yep.
she checks. So I just wanted to bring up that she wanted to tell you this, but she's...
Thank you.
Oh. Also, if you have guns and your child, no matter what age, says, ask you about the gun, make them bored with the gun. Drop what you're doing, go get it, show it to them safely. Make them so bored that it's now no longer an object of curiosity.
Thank you.
I did that every time with her.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, I just have a comment and curiosity. I wonder about, is it in England or London that they do not carry guns? And
There are
they
many-
seem to,
There are
they-
many countries do not allow
Japan,
civilians
but I
to have
think it's
guns.
also England or
Yes.
that.
Right.
And so I'm wondering about that and how successful they are and with them, and if they are successful, where there is not that much homicide and so forth, are they taught to grow, when they're growing up, that thou shalt not kill? Are they more Christian than the Americans that they are following through? So, to me, they would be a model. Because for myself, my husband, he had guns. I've never seen his gun. But for me to know that I have killed someone and see them bleeding and all that is as devastating as if I died. So I'm just wondering, how do those countries and their homicide rate, what's going on there, and what are they taught to be able to abide by that?
I don't certainly have all the statistics. I did a little bit of reading. I know that Scandinavia, you cannot carry a gun. Australia, you cannot carry a gun. Many countries, you cannot carry a gun. We are, we as a country, the way we developed are kind of unique, to say the least, okay? And we did live in a society and created a society where people felt that guns were necessary, either to I'm just going to say it the way I see it, to get more land, okay? In the United States early on, it was okay. You could use guns to do that. You could use guns to control people you didn't agree with. We did that. And we think it was, and many times we thought it was acceptable. We have a little more thought about it now, but we thought it was acceptable. So guns have been very much a part of American society, obviously because of what was in the Constitution, was nothing more than verifying what the thought was. It wasn't like, aha, this is a new thought. And in those countries, if you can't own a gun and it's illegal, most people, the suicide rate with guns and the suicide and the murder rates are not even comparable to the United States. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't carry guns. I'm just telling you what I read and thought about. Now, wait a minute. Give me a second. We got all kinds of hands. Yes, okay. Go ahead, Jackie.
No rush.
Okay.
Good morning. I don't want to share what I think because that would imply I want to change minds, and we're all entitled to our thoughts. But the thing that struck me the most in what you said in the original opening was you said, your father said, as I recall, you shouldn't have a gun because you would think. And I was sort of like, whoa, wow. And I wonder, did he really mean you shouldn't have a gun because you would feel. For me, what I resonated with you was this sense of, if I'm being threatened, and it's a complicated matter, of course, but the thought of what I would inflict on someone else so consumes me that the gun would be useless. And when it comes to protection and all that, I don't know. I'm not in that position. But the idea of just the feeling part of it, that's what is my stopgap, if you will. Thank you for letting
I'm
me
going to help
share.
you here, Rob, because there's somebody over here. I want to make sure some other people get a chance to talk. Okay? Right back here. Angie?
I do think my opinions on the subject would be at odds with a lot of the room, but I think we overestimate ourselves as humans, and we forget that we're still animals, and a lot of our actions stem from primal instincts and stem from not the prefrontal cortex, but the rest of the brain. And I think we have a tendency to feel that we can handle the technology that we've developed it just because we as a human race have developed these technologies, but tend to forget or not acknowledge that that's not how we operate. So, yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, dear. Thank you. Okay, let's see. No, I just want to know if anybody else wants to speak. Okay, thank you, Robin. Who has not spoken yet? Thank you.
So for me, the thing that I keep hearing the word protect and defend, and I don't know, and maybe I'm kind of idealistic, but I walk this planet feeling safe. I think that if we think that we need to protect ourselves, or we're fearful, that we attract unconsciously that kind of energy to us. I'm a native New Yorker. I've lived in New York the majority of my life, and walked in some places that I probably had no business being, but I always walk safe. And I'm not saying that there's no right to have a gun. I think a gun has its place. I've learned from people that have educated me about guns, because I was a person, I was like, I don't see a need for it. But when you can talk to people and they can help you understand why they have that position, and that it's not the gun that kills people, it's the people that use the gun to kill people, then it makes a whole lot of sense. But for me, I think that if we could get away from thinking that there was something going to be taken away from us, or something that we would be at harm, because there's lots of ways to deal with people, and that's just my 2 cents. I always call myself safe, and that's what I attract.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Tom, you haven't said anything yet? Go ahead. And the young lady back there, go ahead.
Yeah, my thought follows up on what Robin said. I'm wondering, why do I have absolutely no urge to have a gun? Is it that I think something couldn't happen? No. I think it's pretty deep in me that it can so easily become a vicious circle. If you have a gun, doesn't that cause you to be fearful? Now, I don't want that kind of fear in my life. So I would rather take the small risk that something will happen to me or someone I love, that maybe under 1 in 100 circumstances a gun would help. I'd rather take that risk than have that constant fear in my life.
Thank you. Back here in the back, this young lady. Thank you.
I just want you guys to know I'm in high school, and I know for a lot of the kids with the gun control and the Second Amendment, because I'm in high school and I'm listening to all of you talk, I agree with some of the things you say, and I know I'm going to be like, my opinion's going to go up against a lot of you. And because like I'm a teenager, maybe it might not make sense. But because I'm in high school, we go to school every day, and some of the kids don't even show up anymore because we're so afraid of getting shot by other kids. We wake up in the morning and we look on Twitter and Instagram and like all these social media sites, and we see these crazy kids posting, I'm going to come to your school and I'm just going to shoot all of you. And some of us wake up in the morning and we're like, we're just going to, not go to school, and we get taken to court for it and stuff, but they don't understand that the fear is put into us to the point that we don't want to go to school anymore. And I get the Second Amendment. It's like, it's a right for humans to have, but I want to major in history. And so the Second Amendment was made so long ago when we didn't have a military and we needed to defend ourselves. But we're in times now where we have a military to protect us, and I agree that we should be allowed to carry pistols and stuff, but why give someone a military weapon that could shoot hundreds of us in high school when we could just have one where the police could make it onto campus in time to save at least a few of us? Because kids are dying every day, and I'm in that environment.
Thank you, honey. Thank you. Okay, now, I'm running out of time here, okay? Okay, thank you, Elsie. Thank you. Ellie. Now, Mark, or you had your hand up, and you had your hand up, I believe. Is that right? I just wanted to comment. Okay, sure.
This is where we are now.
Mm-hmm.
What she said and what she feels
Okay.
is unacceptable. Whatever fears adults have, her fear is unacceptable. For her to grow up this way in this country is unacceptable.
Thank you. Thank you. And I heard, just to make sure she heard you, you were saying that it's not unacceptable to feel that way. It's unacceptable that she's being caused to feel that way. Just so she was supporting you, honey, okay? Just so you know that.
I get what you're saying about what happened, but I learned that years ago, like when my mom was going to school, people would just go outside and have a fight, hand in hand.
Yeah.
Nowadays, they're bringing guns into school. They're
Yeah. Thank you. And that's what, and she's saying that's unacceptable for you to have to live in that environment, okay? Thank you. All right. You haven't said anything except through your father. I want you to say something on your own. Go ahead, and then we're going to close.
I just have one sentence. You can build a gun in your garage. So if you buy it, you can just buy the parts and put it together in your own house.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we can get hold of a gun if we want one. That's not the, I agree with you. And so I'm not speaking against the Second Amendment. I may disagree with it on a personal level, and I know that's heresy, but I just happen to disagree with it in today's world. And at the same time, I think, as long as the law, I'm going to abide by it and support people in abiding by it. Okay, now, Ellie, you've said several things, honey, so I'm not going to call on you, but you've got the last word, since you agreed with me a while ago, so go ahead.
Oh, good. When I was 14, I had a man hold a gun to my head and rape me. I had no defense. There was not a darn thing, I remembered where I was, so I said darn. There wasn't anything that I could do. I wasn't even 5 feet tall. I did not weigh 100 pounds. I could not stop this man.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I could have, freaked out. I could have lived from a position of fear for my entire life because of that. And I said, no. I said, I refuse to walk around afraid. I'm not going to do it. And I said, and I'm not going to give this jerk any power over me. I'm not going to let him make me live the rest of my life a certain way because of whatever actions he took. and I got help, and I went on with my life. I could have very easily been somebody constantly packing a gun out of that fear. No. And you were talking about we've talked about the history and the Second Amendment and all of that. Part of the reason for the Second Amendment is actually for the citizenry's protection, because how many times has the government, think of Germany in World War II, think of some of these other totalitarian governments who just totally destroy their citizens. That Second Amendment is for the protection of the citizens to say, hey, if the government goes wacko and they start going crazy, you can protect yourself against that. So there is definitely a historical precedent for the Second Amendment. And the other part is, I think our 24-hour news cycle, whenever one of these events happens, it's just bam, 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 constantly. And that reinforces that constant fear. And so, yes, there is a possibility, unfortunately, that somebody could do that at your school. The likelihood is probably not. And I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't happen, don't get me wrong, but you have to make a choice. Do you want to live in constant fear, or do you want to live your life? And so if you do that, get up and go to school. Get up and go to work. Do what you want to do to go live your life. You can't live that somebody's going to go wacko, because it may happen. You have to live your life however you want to live it, and be happy, be joyful, be blessed that we're here, and then go from that point.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, just because of time, we're going to stop. I think we've probably going another half an hour with no trouble whatsoever, but we're not going to. So I'm going to ask of